What if I told you the war between Israel and Iran didn't begin in 2025, or in 1948, or even in 1979? This is not just about politics. It never was. It began with a promise and a wound, a sacred oath spoken under the stars of the ancient Near East, and a rupture between two brothers whose descendants would never see the world the same way again. You've seen the headlines, you've heard the warnings, but what if what's unfolding now, the missiles, the alliances, the fear of a global storm, was already written, not in strategy rooms or secret briefings, but in the ancient scrolls of Genesis, Ezekiel, and Revelation? This isn't just conflict. This is prophecy in motion, a spiritual fault line stretching across centuries from the tents of Abraham to the battlefields of modern geopolitics. And whether you believe or not, the war has come to your doorstep. In this journey, we will uncover secrets buried for millennia, decode prophecies dismissed as myth, and reveal how the rivalry between Israel and Iran was never just about land, but about destiny. So the question is no longer, what's happening in the Middle East? The real question is, where do you stand in a story that began before you were born and may decide the world's final hour? Part 1. The first tier. Ishmael and Isaac. Before there were nations, armies, or borders, there was a man called Abraham, chosen, set apart, given a promise directly from the mouth of God, I will make you the father of many nations. But years passed. His wife Sarah grew old, and no child came. So Abraham, the man of faith, did what many of us do when waiting becomes unbearable. He took matters into his own hands. At Sarah's urging, he had a son with her Egyptian servant Hagar. His name was Ishmael, and Abraham loved him, fiercely, tenderly, as his own, because he was. But then, the impossible happened. Sarah conceived. At 90 years old, she gave birth to Isaac, the child of promise. And that's when heaven made a decision that would echo through history. Genesis 17:20-21 says it plainly. God tells Abraham, "As for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, one son blessed." But the covenant, the sacred eternal partnership between God and a chosen people, was given to the other. This wasn't just a family dilemma. It was the first spiritual fracture in human history, a divine line drawn between two destinies. And that fracture has never truly healed. Now pause for a moment, because here comes the twist that most people overlook. Yes, Isaac received the covenant, but Ishmael was not cursed. In fact, he was promised multiplication, power, nationhood. God said his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. In other words, both lines would grow, both would thrive, both would believe they were the rightful heirs. So what happens when two peoples bound by blood each believe they carry divine legitimacy? The answer is not just found in deserts and temples. It's playing out in modern headlines, because Ishmael became the father of the Arab peoples, and Isaac the father of Israel. That's why this conflict cannot be solved with treaties or tanks. It began in a womb and in a word from God. Thousands of years later, the descendants of these two brothers still walk the earth, still bear the legacy of blessing, still carry the tension of a spiritual divide. But there's another layer, one that theologians and historians have debated for centuries. It's not just about which son was chosen, it's about what it means to be chosen. Does chosen mean favored, or does it mean burdened? Does it mean privileged or entrusted? For Isaac, being chosen led to exile, slavery in Egypt, wandering in the wilderness, and centuries of persecution. For Ishmael, being outside the covenant didn't mean forgotten, it meant power without purpose, unless reclaimed. And so the great mystery unfolds. Could two nations, both born of Abraham, both blessed, be destined to collide, because neither could yield their claim to the divine? This is not a tale of villains and heroes. It's the story of two lineages, both shaped by divine promise, both wounded by human pride. And here's where the tension tightens. In Islamic tradition, Ishmael, not Isaac, is seen as the rightful son of sacrifice. The Kaaba in Mecca is tied to Ishmael's story. The entire theology of Islam hinges on the idea that the blessing passed through Hagar's son, not Sarah's. In Jewish and Christian tradition, however, the line of covenant flows through Isaac to Jacob, to the tribes of Israel, to the Messiah. So which is true? Or is the deeper tragedy that both believe they are fulfilling the will of God and are willing to fight, die, and destroy for it? This isn't just theology, it's geopolitical, it's emotional, it's generational. And it's personal if you understand the war is not just between countries, but between covenants. Because in the end, this isn't about who God blessed, it's about what humanity did with the blessing. And this is only the beginning. In the next part, we'll see how a man named Muhammad stepped into this ancient rift and redrew the map of the spirit world by claiming Ishmael's legacy. So don't go anywhere. The next twist will shake your view of history and redefine everything you thought you knew about Jerusalem. Part 2. Mecca versus Jerusalem, the spiritual realignment. The tear between Isaac and Ishmael should have remained a family wound. But by the 7th century, it had become a firestorm that would reshape the spiritual map of the world. Enter Muhammad, a caravan trader from the deserts of Arabia, who at the age of 40 claimed he was visited by an angel named Gabriel. The message he received, that the God of Abraham, the same God of Isaac and Ishmael, was calling him to restore the original faith. Muhammad didn't trace his spiritual authority through Isaac like the Jews and Christians. He declared himself a descendant of Ishmael, and in doing so, he rewrote the entire spiritual genealogy of the Middle East. He proclaimed that Ishmael, not Isaac, was the true bearer of Abraham's legacy, and that Mecca, not Jerusalem, was the rightful center of worship. This wasn't just a new religion, it was a realignment of covenantal identity. A shift so seismic that within a century the Arab tribes were united not just by blood but by belief, and Islam had spread across continents, replacing empires and swallowing ancient faiths. Now pause. Think about what that means spiritually. For nearly 2,000 years, Jerusalem had stood as the holy epicenter, the city where God placed his name, where Isaac was almost sacrificed, where the temple stood, where Christ was crucified and resurrected. But now a new revelation claimed that Mecca, a city unknown to the biblical prophets, was the new spiritual axis. This wasn't just geography, it was theology in motion. It was a dramatic overwriting of sacred space. Jerusalem wasn't just replaced, it was absorbed, reinterpreted, redefined. In Islam's narrative, Abraham and Ishmael built the Kaaba in Mecca, making it the first true house of God. In the Quran, the sacrifice of Abraham's son, a defining moment in the covenant, is preserved, but the name of the son is left unspoken. Many Islamic traditions assume it was Ishmael, not Isaac. This silence is loud. It is an intentional shift, a quiet severing of the old and a claiming of the new. While the Jewish people were scattered across the world, stateless, templeless, mocked, and persecuted, Islam grew into a global force with cities, scholars, caliphates, and power. The children of Ishmael had not only survived, they had inherited interpretation. And in that power came the ability to reshape the story itself. So now imagine this: two sacred cities, two holy mountains, two claims to Abraham, but only one can be the center. Mecca, where the Kaaba draws millions in pilgrimage each year. Jerusalem, where the Western Wall and the Dome of the Rock stare at each other in silence. Both claim divine origin. Both believe they are the keeper of the true legacy. But what if both are right and both are wrong? What if the deeper issue isn't which city is holier, but who gets to decide what holy means? By claiming Ishmael, Muhammad didn't just give Arabs a lineage. He gave them a divine mandate to carry what they believed was the final revelation and to correct what had been corrupted in Jewish and Christian tradition. It was no longer about being part of Abraham's story, but about finishing it. And with that came conflict not only with Jews, but with Christians who believed the covenant was fulfilled in Christ. Now the question was no longer whose land is this, it became whose truth is this. And once truth itself becomes contested, every stone becomes a battlefield. In the next part, we'll witness the return of something unimaginable, a nation that vanished, returning from the ashes and reigniting the covenant that refused to die. The rebirth of Israel isn't just a historical event. It's the moment prophecy re-entered politics and theology exploded into modern war. Stay with me. What's coming next may explain the deepest wounds of our time. Part 3, 1948. Israel is reborn, and a wound reopens. For nearly 2,000 years, Israel was nothing more than a memory, a name whispered in synagogues, a prayer at the end of every Passover next year in Jerusalem. It was a hope, a longing, a prophecy suspended in time. But in 1948, that prophecy came down like lightning. After the unspeakable horrors of the Holocaust, 6 million Jewish lives extinguished, the world finally said, "Never again." And with that cry came a political miracle. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion stood up in Tel Aviv and declared, "The land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. We hereby proclaim the establishment of a Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel." It was as if the bones of Ezekiel's vision had risen. The people scattered among the nations had returned. To Christians steeped in prophecy, it was clear the line of Isaac had returned to the covenant land. A nation reborn in a single day, exactly as Isaiah had written centuries before Isaiah 66:8. But to the Islamic world, this was not a miracle. It was a provocation, a theological insult. How could a people who had been cast out, cursed, and colonized suddenly reclaim sacred land and declare divine right? Remember, Islam teaches that the Jews had distorted the message of God, that the covenant had passed through Ishmael and then through Muhammad, and now the rejected son had returned, claiming to be chosen. To many Arabs, it wasn't just political, it was personal. The return of Israel was not the fulfillment of prophecy. It was the reopening of an ancient wound, and that wound bled immediately. Within 24 hours of Israel's declaration, 5 Arab nations declared war. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon invaded from every side. They outnumbered Israel in troops, tanks, planes, and weapons. The goal was clear: erase Israel before it could even take its first breath. But something strange happened. Against all odds, Israel survived. It didn't just hold its ground, it expanded. To the Arab world, this wasn't just a defeat, it was a divine contradiction. How could a nation that shouldn't exist win a war it shouldn't survive? Here lies the paradox that still haunts the Middle East. The very existence of Israel to Jews and Christians is proof that God keeps his promises. But to many Muslims, that same existence is proof of injustice, even blasphemy. Because if Israel's return is legitimate, then what of the Islamic claim to the land? What of the sanctity of Mecca, of Muhammad's revelation of the Ummah? And perhaps more painfully, what of Palestine? Hundreds of thousands of Arab families were displaced, villages destroyed, borders redrawn. What Jews called homecoming, many Palestinians experienced as catastrophe, the Nakba. And so 1948 did not resolve prophecy. It provoked it. It reignited the question, whose covenant is true, whose story wins, whose God reigns in Zion. But this is not a tale of sides. It's a tale of collision. Between memory and destiny, between faith and fear, between 2 sons of Abraham, both claiming inheritance. And in the ashes of war, a new reality emerged. Israel was here to stay. But peace had vanished into the wind. The front lines were drawn not just on maps but in theology. Every bullet fired carried the echo of a spiritual rivalry stretching back to Genesis. And beneath the surface, Jerusalem waited, not as a city of peace but as a trigger for the next explosion. And beneath the surface, Jerusalem waited, not as a city of peace but as a loaded fuse waiting for someone to strike the match. That moment would come in 1967, when in just 6 days the world would witness something so unexpected, it would send shockwaves through every mosque, every temple, every nation. In the next part, we'll uncover how Jerusalem, the ancient crown of covenant, became the battleground not only of nations but of eternal claims. Part 4, the 6-day shock and the spiritual aftershock. If 1948 reopened an ancient wound, then 1967 drove a dagger into its heart. That year, the world watched as Israel faced what seemed like certain destruction. Surrounded by hostile armies, outnumbered in soldiers and firepower, Israel stood on the edge of annihilation. But what happened next stunned the world. In just 6 days, Israel defeated Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. It captured the Sinai Peninsula, the Golan Heights, the West Bank, and most shockingly, East Jerusalem. Jerusalem, the eternal city, the most contested piece of land in human history, the crown jewel of prophecy, and now, after nearly 2,000 years fully under Jewish control. To the Western world, it was a geopolitical marvel. To many Christians, a fulfillment of prophecy. But to the Islamic world, it was a spiritual earthquake. Jerusalem is not just a city to Islam, it's the third holiest site in the faith. It's where the Prophet Muhammad is believed to have ascended into heaven during the night journey. It is home to the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock, both perched atop the same hill where the Jewish temple once stood. Now imagine, in just 6 days that sacred hill fell into the hands of those Islam saw as the rejected lineage. Not just politically, theologically. This wasn't just military loss. It was spiritual humiliation. Because in Islamic tradition, the Jewish people had been dispersed by divine judgment. They had lost the temple. They had wandered. They were not meant to return in strength, especially not to the most sacred sites. But suddenly, the very people once seen as exiled by God were standing on the mount where the temple once stood, raising their flag. The defeat of 1967 wasn't just on the battlefield. It was in the realm of meaning. For centuries, Jerusalem had symbolized a hope for peace even among rival faiths. Jews prayed for it. Christians pilgrimaged to it. Muslims revered it. But now it became a flashpoint, not of prayer but of power. Israel didn't destroy the mosques. In a controversial move, they allowed the Islamic Waqf to retain control of the Temple Mount. But to many in the Arab world, it didn't matter. The symbolism was too loud to ignore. The covenant had returned, and for millions of Muslims it felt like history had betrayed them. The defeat also fractured Islamic identity. If God had truly favored them, why had He allowed this? Had they failed Him? Had they grown too worldly, too divided? From this spiritual disorientation came a new fire, the rise of religious radicalism, a new wave of Islamic revival, one that would stop seeking compromise and start seeking revenge. You see, when a sacred site falls, it doesn't just change maps, it changes minds, and minds turn toward militancy. Jerusalem, the city of peace, became a battlefield of the soul. To this day, the Temple Mount is ground zero for tension. A single spark, a protest, a rumor, a stone thrown can trigger global outrage. Because it's not just real estate, it's prophecy on edge. And yet beneath all the outrage and ideology, one truth lingers quietly. Why Jerusalem? Why has this one hill smaller than a football field become the center of so much bloodshed and belief? Because it represents something deeper than geography. It represents identity. It asks the ultimate question, who belongs to God and who does not? And that question has not been answered. But it would not remain unchallenged for long. Just over a decade later, another nation, one with an ancient soul and a modern thirst for vengeance, would step into the chaos. Iran, once a Persian empire, now a Shiite theocracy, would declare war not just on Israel, but on the very idea of its covenant. What happened in 1979 wasn't just a revolution, it was a reawakening. And it would send shockwaves through the Middle East and into the future. Part 5, 1979. The Islamic Revolution and the birth of theological warfare. The world saw it as a political uprising, but in truth, 1979 was the year theology took up arms. Iran, once a proud ancient empire shaped by poetry, science, and royal prestige, had embraced modernity under the Pahlavi monarchy. Western suits replaced turbans. Skyscrapers pierced the Persian sky. And for a time, it seemed Iran would walk in step with the modern West. But beneath the surface, something older and deeper was stirring. The people were restless. The soul of the nation was uneasy. And then came the revolution. In February 1979, the Shah of Iran fled, and into the vacuum walked Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a cleric exiled for preaching against Western influence and spiritual compromise. He returned not as a politician, but as a messiah figure for millions. What he offered was not just new leadership, it was an entirely new worldview. He declared Iran a Shiite Islamic republic rooted not in democracy or monarchy, but in divine governance under Islamic law. It was a political earthquake. But it was more than that. It was a spiritual declaration of war. In the eyes of the new regime, Israel was not merely a rival nation. It was the embodiment of corruption, oppression, and unholy alliance with the West. Khomeini coined the term the little Satan for Israel and the great Satan for the United States. But this wasn't just inflammatory rhetoric. It was a theology of conflict. According to Iran's revolutionary ideology, Israel's existence was an affront to the true Islamic order. It occupied land that belonged in their eyes to the Muslim Ummah, and worse, it claimed divine right to do so. So Iran resolved not just to oppose Israel militarily, but to erase it theologically. But here's where the war grew even more dangerous. Iran didn't attack directly. Instead, it empowered proxies groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and later Hamas in Gaza. Armed, funded, and theologically indoctrinated, these militias became the new front lines of divine resistance. Every rocket launched, every tunnel dug, every martyrdom claimed was not merely political. It was declared to be jihad's sacred struggle. For the first time in modern history, Israel's enemies weren't just soldiers. They were preachers with rifles, clerics with manifestos, radicals who didn't fight to win territory but to fulfill what they believed was divine prophecy. Iran's revolution exported more than ideology. It exported apocalyptic vision, a belief that the end times were near, that the Mahdi, the hidden imam of Shiite eschatology, would return, and that Israel must fall for that return to be fulfilled. This wasn't war over borders. It was a war over God's will. And suddenly the world found itself caught between two narratives. One claiming that Israel's rebirth was prophecy fulfilled. The other declaring that Israel's destruction was prophecy required. Both sides quoting scripture. Both sides invoking Abraham. Both sides saying God is with us. It's no wonder the battlefield kept expanding. From the mountains of Lebanon to the streets of Gaza, from secret nuclear programs to cyber attacks and assassinations, a new kind of war had begun. A war without end dates, without front lines, and without compromise. Theological warfare. Because when your enemy becomes a symbol of spiritual corruption, peace isn't just unlikely, it's heretical. But the war didn't stay in the shadows, it evolved. In the next part, we'll uncover how Iran and Israel brought their ancient feud into the age of satellites, digital surveillance, and ideological warfare, and how the next great battle might be fought in cyberspace, not synagogues. Stay with me. The invisible war is about to reveal itself. Part 6. Digital Jihad versus Cyber Zionism. The battlefield has shifted. No longer defined by barbed wire and bomb craters, the new front lines glow blue in the dark lines of code satellites in orbit, firewalls built like fortresses. The war between Iran and Israel is no longer just boots on the ground. It's brains behind keyboards. A new kind of holy war fought in the invisible realm of cyberspace. Israel calls it cyber defense, but it's far more than that. And Iran calls it electronic resistance, but it's far more dangerous than we think. Let's go back to 2010 when something unprecedented happened. A mysterious computer worm called Stuxnet slipped silently into the nuclear facilities of Iran. It didn't explode, it didn't kill, it simply lied to machines. And in doing so, it sabotaged Iran's uranium enrichment program without firing a single shot. This was the first time in human history a cyber weapon damaged a nuclear facility. No nation officially claimed responsibility, but cybersecurity experts worldwide traced it back to a joint US-Israel operation. It was the digital equivalent of a surgical airstrike, but no one saw it coming. And it didn't end there. Iran learned quickly. In the years that followed, they developed their own cyber units, elite teams working in silence, some embedded within the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, others masquerading as civilian tech firms. Their targets, Israeli water systems, banks, airports, even medical centers. Attacks ranged from denial of service disruptions to ransomware blackouts, each one a reminder that war doesn't wait for a declaration anymore. But this war isn't just about code. It's about narrative. Iran has launched vast disinformation campaigns using fake social media accounts, bots, and even AI-generated influencers to flood the internet with anti-Israel propaganda, conspiracy theories, and geopolitical distortions. Israel, in turn, invests heavily in cyber intelligence and AI surveillance, creating some of the most advanced tech firms on Earth, many of them staffed by graduates of the elite Unit 8200, the Israeli military's cyber command. And now both sides are moving beyond hacking machines. They're trying to hack minds. Iran targets diasporas, college campuses, Western media. Israel responds with high-tech counter-propaganda, launching digital tools that expose fake news in real time and flood hostile sites with facts, satire, and surveillance footage. This isn't just a war of data, it's a war of truth, and both sides believe they are defending God's version of it. Think about this. In ancient times, prophets stood in the courts of kings. Today they trend on Twitter or vanish in a wave of shadow bans. This digital war has blurred every line between soldier and civilian, between battlefield and living room, between faith and fear. Because when one tap on a screen can shut down a hospital or ignite a riot in the streets of Jerusalem, we are no longer dealing with conventional warfare. We are witnessing a theological war disguised as a tech war. Iran believes it is defending the sacred, fighting corruption, colonialism, Zionism. Israel believes it is protecting the covenant, survival, sovereignty, the future of the Jewish people. And both sides are becoming masters of digital deception. But ask yourself this: if both sides are fighting in God's name, then who guards the truth? Who filters the signal from the noise? And what happens when even your faith is subject to algorithmic manipulation? In the next part, we'll leave the present and return to prophecy. Because long before cyberspace existed, the prophet Ezekiel described a terrifying alliance, one that would rise from the north and march toward Israel. Could Iran's modern ambitions be part of a plan that was written thousands of years ago? Stay with me. The scriptures are about to speak. Part 7. Ezekiel's Vision. Persia rises again. Long before Iran was called Iran, it was known as Persia. And long before tanks rolled across borders and satellites circled the earth, a Hebrew prophet exiled by a river in Babylon saw a war that hadn't yet happened, a war that still hasn't, but may be forming before our eyes. His name was Ezekiel, and in chapters 38 and 39 of his scroll, he wrote of a terrifying vision, one that has haunted theologians and historians for generations. A vision of Gog from the land of Magog, a leader from the far north who gathers a vast military coalition to invade Israel, a land of unwalled villages, a people gathered from many nations. Ezekiel names the nations involved in this final assault. Among them is a familiar name, Persia. Yes, Persia, modern-day Iran. Thousands of years ago, when Israel didn't even exist as a modern state, Ezekiel foresaw a time when a revived coalition of nations would unite against it. Not for land, not for revenge, but for something far more spiritual to extinguish the covenant. Now let's pause and look around, because the details of Ezekiel's vision sound chillingly contemporary. He describes an alliance of northern powers with eastern and southern support: Gog, Magog, Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, Togarmah, Cush, Put, and Persia. Many scholars link Gog and Magog to lands north of Israel, some identifying them with Russia and parts of Central Asia. Cush and Put are often connected to North Africa and the Horn of Africa. Gomer and Togarmah are thought to be regions of modern-day Turkey. And then there's Persia, unmistakably Iran. As of today, Iran is allied with Russia, Turkey, and various Islamic regimes. They share intelligence weapons and strategic goals. They even conduct joint military drills sometimes on Israel's doorstep. And all of them, in different tones, have voiced hostility toward the Jewish state. Is this the coalition Ezekiel saw? Is it already forming? Ezekiel's vision continues with eerie precision. He says the attack comes when Israel feels secure, at a time when it's gathered back in its land from all corners of the earth, a peaceful and unsuspecting people. That's exactly what happened after 1948. Jews returned from Europe, from Arab lands, from Ethiopia and Russia, a nation reborn, just as prophecy foretold. But now surrounded by enemies again, some ancient, some digital, Ezekiel's war feels less like fantasy and more like forecast. Ezekiel says God himself draws these nations toward Israel as if to set a trap. He allows the invasion only to intervene directly. I will bring you against my land, so that the nations may know me when I am proved holy through you before their eyes. Ezekiel 38:16. This is not just war, it's a divine showdown. And what follows in Ezekiel's vision is apocalyptic earthquakes, fire from heaven, confusion among the invading armies, massive casualties, and the world watching not Israel defending itself, but God defending his name. It's a war Israel survives not through strength, but through divine intervention. That's the climax of Ezekiel 38-39. But for now, we sit in the buildup, the alliances forming, the weapons stockpiling, the rhetoric growing bolder, and the pieces on the chessboard moving into place. Is this just coincidence, or is it prophetic inevitability? And if these nations are aligning as foretold, what comes next? In the next part, we'll turn to another ancient vision, this time from the prophet Daniel, who foretold a peace deal that would be made and then broken. A deception wrapped in diplomacy, a fragile calm before the greatest tribulation in history. Stay with me. The treaty that fools the world may already be in motion. Part 8. The time clock of Daniel and the peace that will break. In the heart of ancient Babylon, a Hebrew exile named Daniel was given a vision not just of his own time, but of the end of time. In Daniel 9:27, he wrote of a ruler to come, one who would make a covenant with many for 7 years, a peace agreement it seems, but halfway through he would break it. And when he does, the world would enter a season unlike any before, a time of great tribulation. But the warning is subtle, because what Daniel describes begins with peace. That's the twist. The end doesn't begin with war. It begins with the illusion of its end. For decades, scholars and theologians have debated, is this a literal treaty? Is it spiritual? Is it symbolic? Or is it a real-world agreement involving Israel that starts with hope and ends in horror? Let's talk about the Abraham Accords. Signed in 2020, brokered by the United States, the Abraham Accords normalized diplomatic relations between Israel and several Arab nations, including the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan. For many, it was historic, a breakthrough, a moment of rare optimism in a region haunted by bloodshed, Jews and Arabs shaking hands, Flags flying side by side, airlines crossing skies once shut by hatred. It felt like prophecy fulfilled, or at least prophecy postponed. But others were not so sure. Iran, Turkey, and Palestinian leadership condemned the accords. They called it betrayal. They warned, this is not peace, this is preparation. In Scripture, peace, when it doesn't come from the Prince of Peace, is often the most dangerous deception. The Apostle Paul wrote in 1 Thessalonians 5:3, "While people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly." What if the most terrifying part of prophecy is not war, but the false calm before it? A peace deal that looks holy, but hides an agenda. A treaty that feels right, but is rooted in compromise. And Daniel says this ruler, whoever he is, will not just break the peace. He will invade the temple, set up an abomination in the holy place, and declare himself as God. But pause. The temple doesn't exist today. Not yet. Which means, for Daniel's prophecy to fully unfold, there must first be peace in Jerusalem, freedom for worship, permission to rebuild. Could the Abraham Accords or a future version of it be the groundwork for such permission? Could peace itself become the trap? Remember, Daniel was told to seal up the words until the time of the end. And as knowledge increases and events accelerate, many believe the seal is loosening, that we are seeing the shadows of the covenant Daniel described. A covenant with many, not just Israel, not just the Arabs, but a global deal supported by powers from east and west. And when it breaks, when it turns, the clock begins counting down, from peace to persecution, from hope to horror. The greatest tribulation, the darkest hour of human history, doesn't begin with a sword. It begins with a signature. In the next part, we return to the present moment, 2025, where rumors of war have become realities. And the ancient feud between Israel and Iran may be nearing its most explosive moment yet. What if what Daniel saw is already in motion? What if the covenant has already been signed and is waiting to be broken? Stay with me. The next headline may already be written in prophecy. Part 9, 2025, Escalation or Fulfillment. The year is 2025, and what was once theory now feels like inevitability. What began as ancient prophecy, what unfolded through centuries of conflict, has now erupted into headlines with terrifying speed. Tensions between Iran and Israel have reached a boiling point, no longer confined to speeches, sanctions, or border skirmishes. This conflict has entered a new phase, a phase where drones replace diplomats, where satellites guide missiles instead of messages, and where the word nuclear is no longer a Cold War relic, but a present threat whispered in classified briefings and war room prayers. Reports still unconfirmed speak of an Israeli military base critical to its defense system suddenly crippled by a cyber-aided drone strike. No alarms, no sirens, no warning, just silence. And then chaos. A shock unlike anything Israel has faced in recent memory. The event, according to unnamed sources, was never officially acknowledged, but insiders hint it changed everything behind closed doors. The Iron Dome recalibrated, IDF command centers hardened, foreign embassies went into alert mode, and on the other side, Iran's confidence grew. Not because of numbers, but because of timing, because every move now feels scripted, as if the players are not strategizing, but fulfilling a role written long ago. Russia strengthens ties with Tehran. China brokers oil deals behind the scenes. Militias in Lebanon and Syria stand at attention. And in Israel, the people whisper, not if, but when world powers begin to take sides. Military posturing in the Mediterranean. Naval buildups in the Persian Gulf. A new cold front spreads not across continents, but across heaven and earth. Is this just escalation, or is this fulfillment? Because if you know the prophecies, if you've studied Ezekiel, Daniel, Revelation, you know that Scripture doesn't just predict war. It describes a moment when the nations surround Israel, when Jerusalem becomes a burdensome stone for all people, when the covenant is tested, when alliances fracture, and when the line between human politics and divine intervention begins to blur. And maybe, just maybe, that moment is here. But let's go deeper. Theologically, this is not just a conflict between two nations. It is a confrontation between two covenants, between the child of promise and the child of resistance, between the eternal oath of God and the last rebellion of man. Israel, according to Psalm 121, is watched over by a God who never sleeps. Iran, in the minds of its leaders, is fulfilling a religious mandate awaiting the return of the Mahdi, believing that chaos may even accelerate his coming. So the question is no longer, who will win the war, whose prophecy is being fulfilled? Is it Ezekiel's vision of Gog and Magog? Is it Daniel's covenant unraveling? Is it Revelation's opening seals? Or is it all of them overlapping in real time, not in metaphor but in missiles? This is not fear-mongering. This is discernment. Because when you see ancient names on modern maps, when you hear biblical phrases echoed in UN speeches, when the land of the prophets becomes the launchpad of prophecy, you have to stop and ask, is this the final hour? In the final main section, we'll move beyond geopolitics and confront the spiritual meaning behind it all. Because whether you believe in Scripture or not, the events unfolding now demand an answer. And that answer won't be found in headlines. It will be found in the covenant, in the war between light and darkness. Don't look away. The final conflict is not about nations, it's about the soul of the world. Part 10. The spiritual meaning behind it all. By now you've seen the headlines, you've heard the politics, you've traced the history. But if you stop here, you'll miss the point of it all. Because this war, this ancient tension between Iran and Israel is not ultimately about territory, weapons, or treaties. It is about a covenant and the forces that have always tried to break it. It is the collision between the eternal and the rebellious, between a promise made by God and a world that cannot tolerate it. From Genesis to Revelation, there is a through line. God chose a people, not because they were great or strong, but because He loved them. He called Abraham out of Ur. He made a covenant with Isaac. He wrestled with Jacob and renamed him Israel, the one who struggles with God. That struggle never stopped. Nations rose and fell trying to destroy Israel. Empires burned their cities, scattered their people, silenced their songs, and yet they survived. Why? Because of Psalm 121:4. He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. That is not a slogan. It is a spiritual reality. Israel is not merely a country. It is the proof that God keeps His word even when the world doesn't. But here's the mystery and the offense. If Israel's existence is the result of a divine promise, then that means God is not finished. And if God is not finished, then judgment is still coming and grace is still available. And that terrifies the world, because it means history has meaning. It means there is a story bigger than any nation or empire. It means we are not in charge. And that's the real war. It's not just about missiles or mosques. It's about the age-old rebellion. We will not have this God to rule over us. Iran's leadership has declared again and again that it wants to wipe Israel off the map. But what they don't realize is that Israel is not held by maps. It is held by the hand of God. Israel does not exist today because of its army. It exists because of a promise that cannot be revoked. And that's the same promise that still calls to all nations, return, repent, believe. Because if God kept His word to Israel after 2,000 years of exile, He will keep His word about everything else, every prophecy, every warning, every offer of mercy. You see, this conflict isn't just a political chess match. It's a window, a glimpse into the spiritual war behind the physical one. The enemy is not Iran. The enemy is not Israel. The enemy is the ancient serpent who has always tried to destroy the people of God, not because of who they are, but because of what they represent. Israel's survival is not just a national phenomenon. It is a divine signal, a sign that the final act of history is approaching, a sign that God's promises are alive, and so is His plan. And that brings us to you, especially those of you who have lived through the decades, who have seen these prophecies inch closer year by year. Because in the next section, we're going to speak directly to your generation, to those who have held the line, kept the faith, and prayed through the silence. You are not forgotten. You are the bridge between promise and fulfillment. Don't go anywhere. The next part is for you, for those who have watched history unfold. If you've lived through wars, shifting governments, collapsing ideologies, and cultural revolutions, this message is for you. You've seen Israel reborn. You've witnessed alliances form, fall, and form again. You've watched prophecy move from dusty scrolls to digital headlines. But here's what matters most. Your generation still carries something sacred, not opinions, not politics, but memory. You remember a world before all the noise, before the world explained away miracles, before faith was filtered through convenience. The survival of Israel and the rising tension with Iran is not just news. It's a spiritual reminder God does not forget what He has promised. And neither should you. You're not too old to be relevant. You're not watching history from the sidelines. You are witnesses to divine patterns, and your wisdom is needed. Now is the time to pray more boldly, speak more clearly, and remind the next generation God keeps His word, and we must keep ours. Hold the line. This story isn't over, and neither is yours.